sometimes you just have to accept that you're going to slip up, or that you're going to have to buy something really quick on the go. If right at the start of your vegan journey, if you can't fully stick to it, if you're being really hard on yourself, that feels like the worst idea to me, rather than doing the best you can. I was so ridiculously not creative in the kitchen. And I think then when my journey started to learning how to cook and being creative with food was when I went vegan, because I couldn't eat all the things that I was used to eating my whole life.
You open this Pandora's box of, okay, there's a new way of cooking, there's these new ingredients, new ways to flavor my food.
When you go vegan, you need to be realistic in terms of planning things out and figuring out where you're going to get your nutrients from.
Elly, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, how are you?
I am very well, thank you, and I hope you are too. Thank you for being here. To anyone who might have stumbled across this episode, maybe in pursuit of finding out a little bit more in terms of veganism, how they can maybe transition to being vegan, or if they've been vegan for a really long time, what would you say your number one piece of advice would be so that they're able to do it consistently in a fun way?
I think the thing that's helped me over the years, and I've been vegan 8, 9 years now, is just not being too hard on yourself. I think sometimes we forget that we don't live in the echo chamber that maybe we live in online, where everyone's doing their life in the most perfect way, most, environmentally friendly way possible. So I think sometimes you just have to accept that you're going to slip up, or that you're going to have to buy something really quick on the go. If right at the start of your vegan journey, if you can't fully stick to it, I think rather than falling off the bandwagon completely, if you're being really hard on yourself, that feels like the worst idea to me, rather than doing the best you can 90% of the time, because it is a really hard adjustment.
Absolutely. I love that. And everyone adjusts in different ways when they try to transition to being perhaps a little bit more plant-based. Someone might be listening to this, they're not entirely plant-based, they're just wanting to find out maybe how to reduce their consumption of animal products. Some people might be listening to this, they might have been vegan their whole lives. But regardless, as long as you're doing what feels right for you and actually adjusting to kind of like know what that remit is, that
Mm-hmm.
helps a lot. And so I remember when I first transitioned to going plant-based, initially it was, okay, we're just going to go vegetarian. And then after vegetarian, very quickly, I decided to cut out everything else and it was kind of cold turkey. But accidentally, sometimes you might end up eating animal products. And I think if you do berate yourself, you have to assess why you're making yourself feel so bad, or maybe where that guilt is coming from. And that all stems from your reason of deciding to go plant-based. So for the
Yeah, for
listeners,
sure.
could you explain like what your reason was that you decided to start following a plant-based diet?
Yeah, so my journey was really similar to yours. I was like, God, I can't eat meat anymore. Felt too guilty about the animals. And then veganism felt too extreme, I was like, God, well, I couldn't do that. But then it just gets to a point where it's not enough and you still feel that like niggling guilt. Or for me anyway, it was like my choice was pretty much predominantly for the animals. Like health wasn't really a factor for me. I was a student at the time, drinking 5 nights a week, and environment. I felt like environment did come into it, but I think the guilt was mostly playing on me in terms of I felt so guilty whenever I ate something that I knew how it had come to fruition. So I went completely cold turkey vegan in my third year of uni, which is about 8 years ago.
It's really funny you say that because I also went vegan in my third year of uni. And
Did
for
you?
me, yeah, it was from a health scare, actually. Well, I say health scare.
Mm,
It's when I got diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease, having an
mm,
inflammatory condition, wanted to reduce down the inflammation in my body and also just start to. It's weird because I started my fat loss journey during that time. I didn't intend to go vegan in order to lose body fat. As we know,
mm.
that doesn't guarantee that you'll lose body fat. But also at the same time, I wanted to nourish my body a little bit more. So at that point, then, when you've been conditioned for a very long time of like getting used to eating the way that you had been eating throughout your whole life, where did you begin? Because for context, you are one of the most incredible content creators and one of the most incredible chefs when it comes to vegan food. And your creativity is insane. So, did you have that before you went vegan, or did it develop as you became vegan?
Oh my God, no. I was writing about this the other day, and I was saying when I was at uni, I had like the four meal was in rotation every single week. It was spaghetti carbonara, an omelette, sometimes like a creamy chickeny pasta, maybe a spag bowl. Was there anything other than pasta that was in that rotation? I don't think there was. It was like I was so ridiculously not creative in the kitchen. Um, and I think then when my journey started to learning how to cook and being creative with food was when I went vegan, because I couldn't eat all the things that I was used to eating my whole life. And I suddenly had to start looking at YouTube videos and buying cookbooks and being like, oh yeah, no, I need to buy nutritional yeast to make things cheesier. I need to buy, your cupboards start filling up with things that you would have never have bought before. Obviously, a lot of things you have, people don't realize they can still eat, so a lot of things will still be fine. But I think the creativity started when I suddenly had to like hit the reset button. And also cheaply as well, because you going vegan during that time in uni is a bit tricky because you're starting things again, you're out of routine and you're trying to live on like £1 a day, you know?
Yeah, so you open this Pandora's box of, okay, there's a new way of cooking, there's these new ingredients, new ways to flavor my food. And you leaned into it, if not jumped into it head first, obviously having lots of fun with experimenting. I
Yeah.
can kind of relate to this because of my background, obviously, in science, in chemistry. I was there playing in the lab with different chemicals, putting things together, like, oh, what does this make? Oh, okay, that's cool. So I get that sense of fun. But I'll be honest, it has never been to that extent, perhaps in the kitchen. And so there might be some people listening thinking, I just think cooking is a chore. I just think it's boring. And to have to go and like slave over these different ingredients and to spend time here, it's just not something that I desire to do. But we know the importance of actually enjoying the food that you're eating and really making sure that it's
Mm.
full of nutrients. So maybe if you were to give a piece of advice to someone who feels like the kitchen is overwhelming and that there's too much to think about, too many ingredients, how do you combine all of it? How would you tell them to start?
It's a really hard question because I think lots of people find their cooking journey in different ways, whether it's like through a really emotive way, they like enjoy cooking with their like family, like a certain family member, or it's like a bit of an escape. But yeah, you're right. Some people just like don't like it at all, aren't interested. And I think, to be honest with you, you can't hugely change those habits unless you change your mindset around like why if you literally don't care about cooking and you don't enter your kitchen ever, then fine. If you really want to enjoy it more, I think you just kind of need to get more into sort of the love and the passion of cooking. Sort of what I've like consumed so much content around that time. Probably not on Instagram, to be honest. I was probably like watching longer form, like YouTube, really beautiful cooking videos. It's like ASMR, camping, cooking videos. Yeah. So I think getting more into like the love and the emotive side of it was for me like what really made me fall in love with cooking. But I think having a good starting place is like a practical advice, having a good starting place of just a well-stocked cupboard is like my number one tip. If you're going out and like buying, because I know I used to do this, you shop for every meal, not your week. You like go out and buy exactly what you need for this specific meal. It gets so annoying when you have to go to a supermarket before you're eating something. It's like that process every single time. So I think having like the basics in your cupboard really helps, and you can ignite a little bit of creativity, knowing that even if you don't go out to the shop, you can probably whip something up.
Absolutely. It's having those staples that you need in your pantry, in your fridge, and then also having some recipes that are nice and easy to fall back on and that you utilize quite a lot of those different ingredients. So even though you've got maybe, 30 ingredients, you can cook however many different meals with that. And that's also really helpful when it comes to, I guess, one of the things if we're talking to the more health conscious people listening to this podcast, which I'm sure if they're listening, they are very health conscious, you're going to want to focus on, okay, well, what do I need to put in my body? Whether it's more protein, whether it's more, B12, the type of things that I might be a bit more deficient in. And as you say, that's where the love can start to come when you learn what different foods provide you, how good you feel when you eat those foods. And so you have those stocked up, and then you have your like guideline of different recipes that you go to. And you will know firsthand how easy it is nowadays to just find recipes that you can follow along. And that's something where, now talking about your transition to becoming a content creator, how did your love and passion from cooking as you turn vegan turn into what you do now, which is inspiring hundreds of thousands of people about how they can eat incredibly tasty and nourishing food?
Yeah, it's crazy because I never thought that this would become my like full-time job, like it was very much just a passion project for so long and like really a creative outlet for like corporate girly world, getting home and actually being like, oh no, I can do this really nice thing that I really love. And turning your hobby into your job is obviously what everyone says you should do, but it's really difficult to make that sort of transition in your brain. So yeah, I started my Instagram years and years and years ago, probably about a year after I first went vegan, when I was first starting to discover cooking. And I had it for like a good 4 years before I took the leap and went full time with it. And it was very much like a needs must situation. I knew I was going to leave my job. Things at that job were like a little bit unstable in terms of I didn't know if I was still going to have it in a few months. So I was like, let me, just take the leap now. Um, and yeah, it went well. It was like very much a combination of hard work, a lot of privilege, to be honest. I was very like lucky in that stage of my life that my partner could support me financially, and a little bit of luck as well. I think you have to admit when the stars align and things go really well. Um, but yeah, I've kind of been in food for the last 5 years. The Instagram account is what made me jump out of the corporate world and be like, no, I can't do it anymore. So I worked in food for that whole time. I had like a whole host of jobs, like working in cafes. I sort of done some private events. I used to assist one of my really good friends on his YouTube channel. And then I was a development chef at a restaurant. So I kind of did all the sort of range of jobs before I then made this my full-time job.
It's such a phenomenal journey because you have to take such a big risk of, okay, well, I don't know if this is going to work out, but my heart says yes, so I want to do
Mm-hmm.
this thing. It's the same with me, like starting my fitness Instagram account during lockdown and just
So
being like,
scary, isn't it?
let me put some tips out there and see what comes of this. And then before I know it, like a year later, I've quit my job and I'm like, oh, so we're doing this then. But the
Mm-hmm.
thing is, when you've got such a passion for that, it kind of feels like the risks, even if it doesn't work out, it's so worth trying. And
Mm.
I want to maybe delve into what people wouldn't see behind the scenes, like how hard did you have to work and how consistent did you have to be with putting out that content in order for you to actually get your foot in the door anywhere?
I think at the start it felt really surreal that like I was like, oh God, suddenly I'm doing this. But because when I had a full-time job, I was filming content all weekend. It was like it consumed my entire life when I wasn't doing my 9 to 5. So when I left my job, I was like, oh my God, I've got so much time to do all of the things that I was cramming into like a one weekend. But quickly it starts to snowball in the fact that you're like, okay, no, but now I actually need to get paid. So I need to do all the admin that comes alongside of this actually being my job. Like you forget these platforms don't really pay you. So unless you're sourcing your income from brand deals, you're not getting paid to do this job. Like the day to day isn't like a rolling income from things like Instagram. Um, so at the start, it's kind of, I know it seems really cliche because it's so new and the dopamine rush you're getting from it is so amazing that you're probably lying in bed at night doing like 4 hours of work, but it doesn't feel like it because you're like, oh my God, this is so new and exciting. More like that's like the honeymoon phase of quitting your job before you then get into the nitty gritty of, oh my God, no, it's only me that's going to get this done, no one else. And that's the really frightening bit. So I'd say it's like stages of, not stages of grief, but it's like stages of each little moment of this becoming your job is like a new reality. And I feel like it's constantly evolving.
Absolutely. And it's evolved for you quite a lot. I'm interested to know, what would you say were like the most pivotal moments since you decided that you were going to go all in on focusing on food to be your passion, your love, your career? What were some of the most pivotal moments that changed the trajectory for you to get to the stage where you are now? You know, I've seen you over the last few months grow by hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram, you know, very exciting project which we'll touch on coming up soon. So yeah, what happened along that journey which you feel propelled you to get to where you are now?
Um, I think deciding to work with people was like a great moment. So doing like lots of different collaborations with people really helped me not only sort of get a little bit more knowledge in the industry, but also like meet some people that are now some of my closest friends. And along with that, meeting my management, who I probably couldn't have like grown the level that I have without them, because they kind of do everything so much behind the scenes. And I think every milestone you hit on social media makes you a little bit, I don't know, sometimes it skews your perception of reality a little bit in that it seems so arbitrary, like you can't quite get your head around it. But I think the moments of hitting those milestones are so essential for you to feel not only the imposter syndrome go, but you also feel like you can, your dreams aren't too big. Like every milestone is like, oh no, actually that thing that I wanted to do like 6 months ago, I can totally do that now. So it gives you a little bit of confidence to do that. So yeah, hitting the milestones, definitely, they're not, not the be all and end all, but they're definitely super important.
Yeah, I love that. It's I suppose a marriage of being hella consistent, putting lots of love and passion into your work. And then as you say, just really seeking and hunting out those opportunities to get to the stage where you have done now. And you spoke about collaborating with different content creators, and you've done plenty of different types of series, both with just your own content, but then also collaborating with others. And perhaps to someone who's only just come across you, what would you explain to them that you do those for? So maybe list a few of them because they're so valuable. They're so valuable, these type of series that you do. And it's because it matters for each and every single individual that might need to eat or adapt what they're looking for in a certain way. And I just think there's so much value in that type of content that you create.
Thank you so much. I love creating series. They're probably like one of my favorite things to do, but because you pre-film everything before you launch it, it's really like a labor of love. Like I feel like I announce I'm doing something, and then like 6 months later, it actually comes into fruition. But the series I've done, I feel like there's so much content online, especially cooking content right now, that I really want to try and solve specific problems for my audience rather than, I mean, a lot of the recipes, I'm not saying every single recipe I put out there is the most original idea that's ever happened, but it's always coined around like a problem solve. So most of my series have been surrounding that. My current one is a budget series. So every portion is under £2. It's like feeding the whole family for under £10. I've done a Christmas series before. That was so fun. That was definitely more of a fun series. And I did last January, this week, January just gone, I did sort of like natural meat replacements. Because I love a meat alternative. I used to love the taste of meat, so I love replacing it. Um, but obviously too much processed, like ultra processed vegan foods and not the best. So I tried to sort of solve that problem too. And that was probably one of my favorite ones, I reckon, my Veganuary series. Also because my audience changed a little bit then, and I got loads of new people in that were suddenly like, oh, what is this? You get some loads of skeptics in, then loads of people that get like super excited because they've never seen anything food like that that's vegan.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you did that one because I have it a lot. Obviously, working with vegan clients, there'll be plenty
Hmm.
that come on board and say, I eat whole foods or minimally processed foods only. So they say that they won't have mock meats, they won't have meat replacements. And then it's a case of, okay, we're going to be working with tofu, tempeh, just whole foods. I'm like, Ellie has a good series that I can send to you. We can make that fit your macros.
To be fair, if I could only do one like replacement for my whole life, it would be tofu. I think that's like number one for me. That girl's so versatile.
So versatile. We can make her into anything. But I think I've also transitioned over the last year or so to eat more whole foods because I feel a
Mm,
bit better off the back of it. And I suppose that's because, I touched on it earlier, autoimmune condition, which is due to an
Mm.
inflammatory response, but also you've had to deal with the health complications and to really focus on what you're nourishing your body with and how you're eating. So I suppose that also the foods that you put into your body, you're very conscious of as well.
Yeah, I think now, when you've been vegan for so long, you get a little bit complacent sometimes. And everything in life is habitual, isn't it? You just fall into like, I'm going to make these 5 meals every week. And even though my job is making food, a lot of the time you do fall into like similar patterns. Um, but I think when I started to get, flare up with sort of eczema and skin issues, I was looking into how you can make a difference in terms of diet. And so much of that is diet based. Like every inflammatory, autoimmune situations. Um, so that really made me delve into just being a little bit more conscious, from someone that, loves the meat alternative, loves the milk alternative, and all these things are fine in moderation. But I think once I started really focusing on sort of the key nutrients in my food was when I sort of saw those things improve. I mean, I definitely can't put it down to that solely. There's been a lot of stuff going on at the same time, but I think that's definitely made a really, really good impact in my health.
Yeah, you're incredibly health conscious. And to be honest, anyone that does decide to go plant based, they need to be because we might be deficient in certain vitamins or certain nutrients. And also, we need to make sure that we're eating plenty of variety and, just not sticking to the same kind of food groups or food sources because ultimately it's not going to be the best for our health. And so, when it comes to your journey of focusing on not only, transitioning your diet for an ethical purpose, but would you say there was also maybe a point in time where you pivoted to focus more on health, fitness, or has that always been a consistent streak throughout your life of importance?
I think it's always been kind of a streak, but never in the food sense. I'd say I always had, not always, but sort of since like the later years of uni, I kind of wanted to get into exercise and was noticing that it had a really good impact on me. But I never made that connection with my food. That was kind of, they were just two completely separate entities to me. But until like I'd say the last 2 3 years, it's been more of a conscious decision to make better choices of my food in terms of my fitness as well. Mainly from a protein standpoint, which I feel like once you've been doing food a long time, you know how to get your protein, but it's really difficult. And I still always get messages about it whenever I put anything on my story about sort of making something a little bit more high protein. People say they really struggle, and maybe it's because a lot of these people have crazy macros that they're trying to hit. They're trying to have 200 grams of protein a day or something, and they're like 5'4" and weigh 50 kilos. But I
Who
think
gave
that
them those macros? Those are those are
wasn't
not the
you.
right It wasn't me.
um, so I think when you go vegan, you need to be realistic in terms of planning things out and figuring out where you're going to get your nutrients from, and also just being really diligent in terms of like blood tests, making sure you're knowing if you've got any deficiencies, and also a good old multivit as well, because as much as we can get 99% of stuff from a vegan diet, there's still some supplementing that needs to happen. So I'd say, yeah, it can definitely seem really daunting, um, kind of switching to it being a bit more health conscious, but it's definitely, I'd say, even more doable than a normal like omnivore diet because you're already eating so much more fiber, so much more variety. I feel like it's an easier transition to make. But yeah, it might be an unpopular opinion.
I no, I do agree with you, but that's perhaps because we've got the baseline knowledge of understanding, okay, what do we need from a protein intake perspective? How many calories do we need to eat to
Yeah.
maintain, lose body fat, build muscle? So this is something that I'm curious to know, and maybe the listeners are as well. Did you always know, okay, I'm going to be eating enough protein if this is how my meals look? Or was there a time that you spent understanding the nutrients and the macros within your food?
Yeah, no, definitely not. I think I started about 3 4 years ago when I was on like a little bit of a fat loss journey. I started tracking my food, and I think that's when I learned a lot more about it. Um, And also, we have to like address that everyone in the food industry that's in the chefy sort of side of the industry aren't nutritionists. So we don't have that sort of, a lot about food, and its nutrient content, but you don't have the same like depth and breadth of knowledge as those kind of professionals. But you can obviously learn a lot yourself. And when I started tracking my food, I was then like, oh my God, my olive oil was, I'm like, drizzling that all over my pesto. And that's got so much sort of fat in it. So I think once you start looking at your food that way, you can learn a little bit more about it. But I also feel I was really nervous to do that because I felt like it was a slippery slope in terms of tracking my food, and I then wouldn't be able to see it in the joyful way I saw it before. So I think it's a really fine balance. I don't think you have to do that to necessarily learn more about the nutrients in your food. But that's what really helped me because I've always had a pretty good relationship with food. So that kind of didn't waver when I did that. But it was definitely something that I hear a lot of people, once they track, they say it takes a lot of the joy out of food in the future.
Yeah, it's very relatable because just like yourself, when I started a fat loss journey, I started tracking food. I learned all the different macros, how much protein I needed, sticking to calories. And we've got to appreciate it's just simply a tool. And we can use that tool, it's like a hammer. You can use it in a good way or a bad
Mm-hmm.
way.
Yeah.
So depending on your relationship with that tool is how the outcome will be. And I can definitely appreciate that when it comes to cooking and having fun with food, like some of that spontaneity is like, oh, a splash or a dash of this, or I'll throw this in there. And then when you've got the friction of having to track every single microgram of everything, it's not so fun. That's where perhaps we don't need to use that tool so meticulously at that point in your life, if that's what you're wanting to, have lots of enjoyment with, or it's actually learning just to, after a little while, have an understanding for thereabouts the quantities that you're using. And that's kind of like the way that we've worked together. You just use your intuition and we just monitor that things are moving the right way because you trust your knowledge with nutrition. But if someone does just genuinely have no idea how many grams of protein are in, 100 grams of tofu, or they don't know in a couple of, vegan sausages how much protein they're getting, it could be a good idea for them to track even just their protein sources, nothing else, just the protein that they're consuming to
Mm.
see how much they get. I think if you were to describe from your journey at this point in time where you've got both performance and body composition focused goals so that you make sure that you're getting in enough protein, how do you think about your meals? Like, how does your brain work when it comes to like, I need to eat a meal, so I need to guarantee that I'm getting the nutrients and enough protein?
Yeah, I think also from like a female health perspective, it's become so much more important to me in terms of like my menstrual cycle and trying to balance like higher protein breakfast. So I think it's something that even before I knew I was getting enough protein, but I don't know if I was like shifting it in the right way of the day. Um, but I always know that like a heaped tablespoon is about 50 grams of something. So when I'm doing like a really big heaped tablespoon, I know that two of those is about 100 grams, two and a half. And then my head is going like 100 grams of that yogurt is like 5 grams per 100 grams. So I've got about 10 grams there. So I'm going through like each element of my food and thinking, oh, yeah, that specific granola's got a bit more protein than that one. So I'm going to have 50 grams of that. And maybe I'll have a spoonful of peanut butter. I feel like I just add up in my head what I'm putting in roughly. That doesn't include like fruits and veggies. They'll just go on as like supplementary. But things that I know have protein in, I'm almost like adding it up in my head to check that I'm there or thereabouts. That's kind of how I do it. Sometimes I put it in my notes. I think I actually put it in my notes yesterday. I did look, protein intake 16.9. Breakfast 24 plus 4 grams equals 28. Plus snack 8 grams. I'm at approx 60. And then I put like 28 left at the end of the day. And then I know like, oh, my dinner needs to be about 30. Then yeah, I'm like weighing out a bit of TVP. Now that I have the baseline, I always know what's in things. So I did like a protein focused recipe where I was like talking about TVP. So I know that has 100 grams per 100 grams, 50 grams per 100 grams. Wow, so many grams going around in my head. Do you know like an approximate amount to do of that? So yeah, it's a little bit of like pinch of this, pinch of that. But once you know how many grams ish are in something, you then, as you're cooking, get a little bit more used to it. But that was a lot of rambling. That's kind of how I do it.
So insightful though, because exactly what you've said there, exactly what you said is I already am kind of like looking at the back of the packet, or I've got already the knowledge of this food ingredient. I can see how much quantity I'm having, and therefore you're kind of totting it up throughout the day. You're not being overly obsessive over those numbers, but it's still something that you're conscious about because you know you need that to repair and recover. You need that to be healthy. You need that to maintain a great body composition. And this is the cornerstone, I suppose, of what I preach, which is when you come to have a meal, think about firstly, okay, what's my protein source? Secondly, how many fruits and veggies am I having here? Then your fats, because it's for females particularly important regarding hormonal health. And then you can kind of add your carbohydrates on. So it's kind of, we're still thinking, we're not just like eating whatever, like looking in the fridge, like what do I fancy? And I think that's a really important thing for us to highlight, is that it's your duty when you go plant-based to still care about how you're approaching your food, but you can still have fun and be creative with it, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think people a lot of the time, especially women, like we've constantly been drilled to like demonize calories and demonize every part of sort of this being conscious of what you're eating process. But when it comes to protein and stuff like that, it kind of, to me, it's a totally separate thing to calories. No matter what journey I'm on, I'm still doing that. It doesn't matter if I don't care about, if I'm in if I'm in a phase of life where I know I've got a lot of social events and I just don't really care that much about how my body looks, which is, to be honest, like 75% of my life. I still am being conscious of like protein intake just so I can feel my best. So I think taking away almost like that little devil on your shoulder that says when you're checking something, it's because you're in that phase and it creates that bad relationship. I think taking away the sort of stigma behind labeling being a really bad thing and having that information being a bad thing in your head. I think as long as you don't form those negative ties with food, you're kind of always on the upwards trajectory of learning more and finding it really interesting rather than going that way.
I love that. So it's changed the label from it having a bad association of, you're having to be controlling, or it's something that you're doing because you're insecure regarding your physique, but rather I'm nourishing my body. I'm interested to know about my health. And that's why we're utilizing this data or this food information. That's such a great way of looking at it through a completely different lens.
Mm.
Has it
Yeah, I
always been
think
that way for you?
um I don't know. I think as I said, I've always had a pretty good relationship with food. I've never sort of fallen down a bad path. I've never suffered with like an eating disorder or anything, but I know a lot of people that have, and I feel like food controls a lot of people's lives in a really bad way. And I definitely don't mean that, allergy label checking advice to those sort of people because that's a completely sort of kettle of fish. But I think for me, definitely shifting my perspective in terms of I would always associate any form of label checking with if I wanted to lose weight or if I was trying to be more conscious with calories. I never thought of it in a good way when I was younger anyway, when I was sort of in like my early 20s. So, oh my God, I can't believe I'm saying early 20s because it's like a stab to the heart. Um, so I think it shifted a little bit. I've never had, as I said, I've never had a bad relationship with food, but I think as women, we all go through the like sort of toxic diet culture phase of our lives when we're like looking at things constantly. And, my mum does that still all the time. She's like, oh, this only got this amount of calories in. So I think a lot of time when you've grown up in that era, your mum's trying to lose weight and her friends are trying to lose weight and stuff like that. So you constantly have that sort of negative connotation with things in terms of checking food. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's always been like that. I've never had, a really bad relationship with it, but it's definitely now I use it to my advantage. It's not me checking that label is not to have a detrimental impact on my life, it's to have a better impact on my life. It's like taking back the control maybe a little bit.
Yeah, it's to enhance your life, enhance your health.
Mm,
That makes perfect sense. And it is important for us to acknowledge that some people, whether they decide to go plant-based and that ties in with a health-focused goal, as it did for me, some people might not be interested in having any type of, fitness associated with their change or transition into being more plant-based. But the important thing for us both to talk about from our experience is that we don't have to utilize tracking things in depth and being really meticulous with exactly how many calories we're consuming in order to pursue a fitness focused goal, whether that's like performance, like let's say building muscle, getting stronger, or if it's physique focused to maybe trim down a little bit and lose some body fat. We've done that both of ourselves in a way where it's actually just intuitive and focusing more so on, okay, where are we placing those nutrients in and around the day, around our training window? And that's just testament again to you saying that knowledge is power. And if you use it in the healthy way, it doesn't have to be detrimental to whatever your mindset is when it comes to your physique and your performance.
Yeah, definitely. I think just building that baseline of knowledge is always going to be more helpful to me than a hindrance. So I don't think it's anything that I would ever not do now.
Yeah. And you've kept
Mhm.
up on top of your fitness journey, obviously, throughout the last few months, which have been very busy for you for an important reason. So let us know, what have you been working on?
Yeah, so this year has kind of been the year that I've been writing my cookbook, which is so exciting. It's coming out next month, which is even more exciting and terrifying. And during that process, it's like I became literally like a little kitchen hermit, and everything I did was in that little box behind me. Um, so fitness was definitely more of an outlet than to say it was like if I could do that, that was like the most exciting part of my day. I was like, oh my God, yes, I'm finally going to get 45 minutes to switch my brain off and not think about anything else. Um, because when you're testing like, you know, 5 recipes every single day over like the course of 4 or 5 months, you do get into this like hamster wheel of you like start to feel slightly insane after a while. So yeah, I've written a cookbook, it's all done. And yeah, it was the most amazing thing I've ever worked on, but it definitely took a toll in terms of my brain and yeah, my like daily habits, my life kind of sort of that had to take complete number one priority for a long time. It's a hard old project, but very worth it.
Very worth it. Your book is plant-based comfort food made easy. So again, to any listeners, it's going to be making your life a hell of a lot easier to eat nourishing food. Why did you choose to write this book? Why was this something that you decided that you wanted to do?
I think again when we talk about labels and sort of veganism, and I don't know about you, but when I first went vegan, it was in the era of like Freely the Banana Girl and Raw till four and all this like yeah, really crazy, sort of incredibly health focused to like the nth degree. And I just wanted to eat food that made me feel really like warm and fuzzy inside. And in the vegan space, there wasn't like tons of that at the time. Now there's tons, but back then there wasn't. So like comfort food, and as I said, like tapping into that sort of emotional side of food was always so important to me and what made me feel good. Um, and one of my favorite things my followers ever said to me was they feel like my food feels like walking into their favorite family owned restaurant. And I was like, that's like the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. So sort of from that point onwards, I always wanted to make people feel really at home, and comfort food is the thing that does that. But the thing I really wanted to do with the book was also make it as helpful as possible, obviously. So each chapter sort of has a different focus, but all my recipes have the protein count as well, because that's one of the main things that I look for in a book. So even if you feel like a recipe is, you know, you're cooking it just for your soul, it's just like soul food, you still know that you're getting like a little bit of goodness in it as well.
That's incredible. And I was so excited for it to arrive. I've got it shipped out here to Dubai. So
Ah!
I literally can't wait. Um, Really interesting though that your perspective was you want to make it feel more like warmly, more soulful food. And I think we can definitely see that maybe with the novelty of vegan food, there's a lot of, as you've kind of said, ultra processed things coming out. There's a lot of, oh, look, we've just recreated this, food that's got lots of animal products in it, but we've made a vegan version. Whereas for what you're explaining, it sounds a lot more like the flavors, the comfort, what it signifies. And so, where did you even start when it came to designing or creating all of these recipes? How do you go about doing that process?
Luckily, I had a pretty good baseline with my Instagram, so I kind of went through and I really wanted to see what my audience loved, what's done really well on my page in the past, and what they would kind of want to see recreated on a bigger format. So I kind of took that as a baseline, and I did, oh my God, I should have got them out. I did so many mind maps. I've got like these A1 sheets of paper with just like recipes after recipes after recipes. And then I would kind of clump them together in to see what sort of chapters made sense throughout the book. Um, and I think a lot of it is a bit of a selfish pursuit, right? You look at it and you're like, what would I really want in a cookbook? Because you feel like you know your audience, and a lot of it is just emulating what you would love to see. So I kind of just had that at the forefront of my mind. But yeah, a lot of mind mapping, a lot of taste testing. As soon as I knew it was maybe going to happen, it was like, okay, I need to start testing recipes right now. And the hardest part was not posting those recipes. So all the ones I would test would be like, oh my God, that is unbelievable. I'd then have to be like, oh my God, I can't tell anyone about that. That's just me. I'm just gonna have to enjoy it and write it down, and that's going in the book. That was the hardest part, was not then being like, oh my God, I need to film this like right now. It's amazing. Because you get that real like hit of excitement when you make an amazing recipe. You want to film it like straight away. But yeah, I couldn't do that.
I
That was the
cannot
hardest
believe
part.
cannot believe that,
Yeah.
considering your Instagram is full of the most phenomenal recipes, and yet you're saying there's like so many better ones that we can't see until we get our hands on the book.
Yeah, I know. That's your teaser for today. Yeah, no, it was so interesting to think that that sort of all happened literally there. And also I was constantly thinking like, how can I make the original ones better as well? So anything that did really well, I really wanted to like tweak and just make a little bit, have a little bit of flair for the book. So yeah, there's about 20% of the recipes are like from my Instagram or like adapted from my Instagram. And then yeah, 80% of them are brand new.
Wow. Okay, I'm excited. With the recipes that you put on Instagram, from the start of time until now, maybe some of the ones that are not in the book, but what would you say are some of the most popular recipes, or the ones that you see that tend to get the most engagement?
I would say on my page, there's kind of no rhyme or reason to it, to be honest. There's some that are really come out of the blue, and I'm like, what the hell? One of them was a like pasta ragu using like shredded tofu, because I think people were like loved that element of it, and that it was again a bit more whole foods focused. One of my most viral videos, it's got like nearly 8 million views, I think, was a ramen, which was really out of the blue because I don't think I'd ever done one before. But again, shredded tofu, so maybe there's a theme here. A lot of my burgers do really well, sort of a little bit more indulgent, like plant-based food. Um, and when I do a trailer, sorry, for any of my series, that usually sort of gets people quite engaged, and they know what they've got like coming out. So when I did the mock meats one, the trailer for that did really, really well, because you're showing them a lot of food that is making them second guess. They're like, whoa, that looks like meat, but it's not. So yeah, stuff like that with a little bit of shock factor. But I feel like I really try and not make that the focus of my videos, because a lot of Instagram is so gimmicky just to reel you in. So I really try not to focus on that, and just, yeah, really good food that I love eating and that I do eat 95% of the time.
I don't think you need any kind of impressive hook. Just seeing the food straight away as I'm scrolling down, I'm like, oh, there's another reel from Elly. I'm like, what is this? And there's like some kind of sticky, sweet chili Thai balls. I'm like, what the hell is this? I want this now. Like, it's instant hunger in that moment. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely incredible. What is the reality of what goes on behind the scenes then? Because you kind of touched on like these series. You'll do the whole series, and then it'll be a really long time until you can, release the trailer and release everything. How long were you working on the book for?
The book actually was a fairly quick turnaround in terms of like book world. Usually people work on cookbooks for like 2 years, but even when people have that sort of long lead time, the recipe writing segment is really short, because your publishers want those recipes as soon as possible to look through them and say, yeah, we've booked in this shoot here and this shoot here. So my recipe writing stint was 3 months, maybe 3.5 months, and that was 80 recipes. So yeah, it was a lot shorter than I think most people work on a cookbook for. But at the point that I had the opportunity, it was like, I knew I needed to do it like right then. You know, those things you just have to grab and run with. My publishers were amazing. They were so supportive in terms of I had loads of help with recipe testing. I had help from every person possible that was in their team. But yeah, it was only about I remember getting the offer back in March, and I had to have it like fully submitted, signed, still delivered every recipe by July. So yeah, 3-4 months, and it was done, which is quite good for my like my kind of brain, which I need that deadline to be able to like go. I think if it was longer, I don't think I would have done it any quicker or any better, to be honest. I think that was like the perfect sort of timeline for me.
Yeah, I watched you pour your heart and soul into that, and maybe lose pieces of your soul along the way because you were
Bit of
working.
sanity is in there as well, yeah. Never get that bit back.
You worked so hard on this, but a pure labor of love. What is the reality then of what you have to put in to write a book? Because okay, even though it was faster than what I suppose many people describe it will take for them to write a book, although I've got this book next to me, Manifest by Roxy Nafusi, and I think she wrote this in 8 weeks.
That's
So yeah,
crazy.
I'm interested to know, like, what does it look like behind the scenes? What is day to day?
Um, Day to day is no glitz, no glamour. There is nothing glamorous about writing a book. You have to be really organized in terms of getting your food shops in. You spend a lot of money on food. And every day is just, I would sit like on that counter behind me, write out exactly what I wanted to make that day, or I'd write it on my little blackboard. What I'd need to make, what I'd need to test, what time I'd need to get it all written up and sent to my copywriter by. And then I would just go. And a lot of the times I'd put on a trash TV, watched a lot of Married at First Sight during that period of my life. That was the good part, is that because I wasn't filming, you don't have to have any silence. So I was just watching constant reality TV. That was my vice. But yeah, it was pretty much every day. It was really early wake up. Sometimes I get out for a quick walk, but I wanted to be like in that kitchen by like 7:30, 8 o'clock, and pretty much just in it until probably 8 o'clock at night, to be honest. They were like 12-hour days of full recipe testing. Because even when you're not recipe testing, I had an amazing recipe tester who, once my recipes were like 90% there, I would send it to her. So it would my days would be either speaking to my editor who was editing the book, like she was going, "What did you mean by this? Did you mean that many minutes in the oven?" And I'd be like, "Oh, maybe not." Or it was speaking to my recipe editor and she'd say, "Oh yeah, I think you need more minutes in the oven." Or it was writing up the methods, because you still have to write them all up after you've done this. Or it was taking photos and also trying to be semi-active online, because whilst you're doing all of this, no one knows that you're writing a book, because you have a certain date, obviously, that you're announcing it, and that's not for a very long time. So you're kind of still cosplaying as normal life. And that was really difficult, was kind of still maintaining that sort of posting schedule and still being semi-active. So that was really hard. But yeah, it was just a lot of late nights, and I wouldn't say it was a lot of tears. I'd say some points maybe it got a bit stressful, but I think at most points I was very much under control of what I was doing. It was just a lot. I was under control, but just there was so much happening at all times. And I think I think I remember saying this to you at one point, like I knew it was a means to an end. I knew at some point I would have this project done and it would be signed, sealed, delivered, and that is now, it's done. So I knew that time was coming. I just knew I had to put in the graft for a good amount of time, and I knew it would mean that I didn't have a summer, which was a bit sad. But hey, got plenty more summers in life.
Plenty more summers. Very exciting next year coming up for you. You did still go on a couple of nice holidays, which I'm glad that you had, because if it wasn't for those, I would have been concerned about you.
Oh my God, they were pre-booked in, and I was like, I can't do anything. Like, poor me, I have to go on these holidays. But when it was like around that time, I was like vibrating, thinking, no, gonna have to do like 20 recipes next week because of this. But yeah, no, definitely didn't regret going on the holidays.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it allowed your sprints to be a little bit faster before you had that rest time. You've basically just described a very food oriented monk mode where you were stuck in your kitchen with married at first sight, lots of food around you, not really speaking to anyone because you couldn't speak about what you
Hmm.
were working on. What's your opinion on work life balance when it comes to really trying to make it or get to a new level within your career?
I think it really, really depends. I think at the start, when this first becomes your job, it's all so novel, and you're like, oh my God, I can do anything at any time of day. I literally, it's only me that's saying no to me, you know? But then as you get more into it, you just, the jobs just mount up and mount up, and then it becomes the opposite of like, oh my God, it is only me. It's only going to be me. If I don't do this, it's not getting done. So I think the workload is pretty intense. I find it pretty intense, and I find it really hard to take time off, as I think most self-employed people do, because you're not passing your workload over to Jenny in another team who's going to do all your work while you're away, whilst your out of office is on, you know. As I said, I'm so lucky to have like amazing, amazing management who are so on it in terms of if I ever want to take time off, they like hold me to that. They're like, no, we're not going to speak to you about anything for these days. And then I'm like, again, okay, I do need to take the time off. Um, but I think you never have a real break because you're still posting, you're still trying to be active, you're still trying to also, as much as I love Instagram's pretty much my whole job, it is like a bit of a beast that needs to be fed content in terms to keep your page going. So that's like very much always in the back of your head in terms of taking a break. You always feel like I can't afford to, my career can't afford to, you know. Um, so that's really hard. But I'd be lying if I'd say that like this isn't an amazing job and I'm so, so lucky to have it. But yeah, it of course comes with loads of challenges. But I wouldn't change it, I don't think.
Absolutely not. You might have to eat a lot of shit to get to where you are, but it's so worth it. Like so worth it. And we're
It's
so
real good
grateful for
shit
you.
though.
That's
Always
very,
eating
very
real
true.
good shit.
It's just been amazing to see you like throw yourself into your passion, but to get so much out of it. The thing is though, you work so hard and you seek those opportunities. So to anyone who might even be wanting to enter the realm of, a content creation when it comes to food or anything else, like you have got to work as if your life depends on it, but also when you love what you do, it makes it that bit easier. And so I'm curious to know like where do you see your future going? What do you see is the trajectory of Ellie's plate?
Oh my gosh, who knows? I never really think that further than like 6 months ahead because I feel like this industry changes so fast that it feels crazy to even like think that that would happen. When I planned sort of this year, at the end of last year, when I planned this year with my manager, we were like, oh, by the end of next year, it'd be good to have a book deal, wouldn't it? And now by the end of this year, I'll have like a fully published book. So things can happen so fast that you couldn't even like my brain last year, if you'd have talked this time last year, I didn't have this, you know, this wasn't in existence. Actually, really strangely, I was looking because my book launches on the 24th of October this year. And I was looking at what was happening sort of that time last year. And on the 24th of October, 2023, I just hit 100K. So exactly a year to the date it will be that my book publishes after that. And I was like, that's crazy to have that milestone. And that milestone for me was like a huge, huge goal. When you start doing Instagram for full time, that's kind of like seen as this pinnacle number. You know, nothing can go wrong after after you've hit that number. So yeah, exactly a year after my book will be out, which is so insane to me. So I honestly can never think more than 6 months ahead. I have obviously goals that I'd love to do. I'd love to, you know, bring certain products out but I think I just really try. And when you have a bit of an anxious brain as well, you try and get ahead of yourself too much. You're always living in the future. And then the present isn't good enough. So I'm trying to like be a bit more present in terms of everything I have going on is so amazing right now. And everything that I have planned for the next 6 months, I don't hugely look I don't have a 5-year plan with this job. It's from Instagram might, they hasn't told me. But yeah, I think being present in the moment is all I'm doing right now.
I adore that you're taking the stoic approach, and it makes me smile because a recent podcast that I recorded with a very good friend of mine and incredible athlete, Anna, she just said that she doesn't have a 5-year plan. She just sees where life takes her. I think it was
Hmm.
last week, Chris Williamson said, fuck the 5-year plan. I'm just going to work hard and see what happens and enjoy it along
Literally.
the way.
Hmm.
So we really don't need to be planning anything other than just doing what we love. But because you have so much passion and so much care behind what you do, I inevitably know that the growth that you will see is just going to remain exponential because you mentioned last year or last October hitting that 100K followers. Where are you now? Like well over 300,000 on Instagram?
Yeah, I think like 350. So it's crazy. Honestly, I can't think about it too much because I can't wrap my tiny, tiny little brain around it.
I'm
It's too
so
much.
happy for
I'm
you.
just a girl.
You are an incredible girl, and I've just seen you thrive both
Oh,
personally,
thank you,
professionally
Mel.
over this last year. And yeah, I'm really, really excited for your future. So, 24th of October, the book is coming out. Tell us,
Yes.
where can we get our hands on it?
Pretty much everywhere, I think. So the link in my bio is like a worldwide link. It will take you to kind of all your local stockists. It's on Amazon. It's in Waterstones. It should be if you're in the UK, like in a lot of your sort of local bookshops as well. It's kind of like you only find these things out closer to the time when you see how many you've sold, how many sort of avenues it's managed to make its way into. But yeah, all major retailers. So wherever you are in the world, you should be able to get it. It might be available a little bit later, like it's available 2 months later in Canada and the US. Um, but yeah, you should be able to get it. It's not later in Dubai though, is it? You get it on the 24th of October.
Pre-ordered. It's coming. It's coming as
Pre-ordered.
soon as it
So
needs
yeah,
to.
if you're in Dubai, you can get it and it'll come to you on the 24th of October.
I will leave the link in the description box below. So if anyone wants to go and order the book, support Elly, and just cook up a storm because I'm just so excited. I will leave everything in the description box, including your Instagram. If anyone is listening and wants to find you right away, what is your IG?
It is Ellie's plate, but it's Elly with a Y because I decided to do that to myself for the rest of my life. But yeah.
Well, Elly, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. And I
Thank you
can't
for
wait to
having
see,
me.
honestly, my pleasure. I can't wait to see everything that you continue to achieve. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mills. Have a good day. Thanks, everyone.